these terrorist attacks, Brian. So the FBI came out today, did a press conference, said a bunch of things that really didn't make any sense. But apparently, this guy declared his allegiance for ISIS, the attacker in New Orleans, Army veteran, served at Fort Bragg, declared his allegiance for ISIS just prior to the summertime. Shortly before the actual terrorist attack, he posted some videos online about saying that he was a member of ISIS and he was loyal to ISIS. That terrorist attack happened. Absolutely horrifying in almost every sense of the word. I have lots of questions about that, both strategically and tactically. But then a couple hours after that, there's this Cybertruck explosion. And yes, EVs have issues with the batteries, but if you've mentioned to me before, most of the time it takes some sort of accident or catastrophic failure to cause a battery, a car fire in an EV. Now that the video's out, it's very clear that this was a bomb. And the Cybertruck terrorist turned out to be Army Special Forces veteran Matthew Livelsberger. And I mean, this guy's a 37-year-old Army veteran with 19 years of service in Special Forces and intelligence. He was found deceased inside the Cybertruck he rented. By the way, both of these cars, the car that the terrorists in New Orleans and the car that was being driven in Vegas, were both rented from the same app. And now we find out just before I went live on the show tonight that this guy had a gunshot wound to the head, killed himself before he detonated somehow. I don't know what the hell's going on here. And both, by the way, this guy served at Fort Bragg. The New Orleans terrorist served at Fort Bragg. I don't know, man. Something just doesn't feel right to me. I'm very concerned about all of this. What's your take? Jump in wherever you want. I know that lead in was long.
No, look, I think what you're talking about, big picture, is that we've got a lot of different variables in this country, don't we, that aren't exactly hopeful. And while we all want to believe that good is on the march, and I think that it is, it's also important to recognize that there's a lot of evil out there. There's a lot of bad that's out there. So one of the things that you're talking about and others have raised is this issue of the southern border, collapsed, 9+ million people here, unvetted and incredibly poor. So we're going to talk about that in a second. There's a case in Brazil that I think talks to us about how important it could be that terror groups could recruit very poor people in this country, especially 9 million illegal aliens. But the other piece, of course, is this homegrown terror concern. And that is what it appears to be, this gentleman, this terrorist in Texas attacking, folks in Louisiana. This guy born and raised in this country. Well, one of the things that we know is that there are about 4.5 million Muslims in this nation. About 60%, based on a poll by a pollster, top-rated pollster called Signal, about a year and 2 months ago, found that 60% of these Muslims in this country actually support and embrace Hamas and their use of terror against Israel. That means that 40% disagree. The point is, there are over 2 million people in this country who actually are Muslim and believe that terror is an effective use and a good use to solve geopolitical problems. Well, that's important. This event reminds us, this horrible, horrible attack in Louisiana reminds us that we do have a homegrown Islamic radical problem. Even if they're not blowing people up, they certainly are willing to justify doing that. That's important, and I think that's critical for us to remember, as well as raise up the voices of the 40% of American Muslims who disagree, to encourage them to stand up in their communities and say no more, not in our name, not in our religion. And we can all disagree on whether or not we believe in Islam or whatever we have in terms of ideological concerns with that ideology or that religion, that's faith. But we need to encourage those 40% to stand up, because this is only going to get worse. And that gets to the other concern that I have. 9+ million people in this country, unvetted illegal aliens, many of them very, very poor. That we have a case in Brazil about a year ago, a guy who was a local Brazilian arrested by Brazilian authorities after he agreed to work for Hezbollah, Iran's terror group, for $100,000 to go kill a bunch of Jews in Brazil. Why did he do it? Because he was given $100,000 to do it, and he was very poor. So that's why I think these stories matter. And then, of course, we have the potential case in Las Vegas of somebody who was just appears to be a nutter. I'm not sure if that's true. He just killed himself in front of Trump, his hotel, and that cyber attack or the Cybertruck, clearly a message to Musk and Trump. But I think that the broader pieces or questions about how many Muslims are in this country, how many of them embrace peace, and then, of course, the 9 million very poor people who are completely unvetted, or how reasonable are they going to be if they're very, very poor approach to do all kinds of criminality, by the way, not just terrorism, but all kinds of terrible things. So that's what's on my radar. That's how I'm processing the past 48 hours.